Cheers, guys. Epix 911, welcome to the Sunday, April 2nd, 2017 edition of VR News. Gonna start, due to a pretty slow news night, with a very good-looking game. A game we last talked about half a year ago. It's coming along nicely. Hopefully it gets released this year. That game is an RPG called SoulKeeper. It kind of resembles Skyrim in how it presents itself animation-wise, and I would say it's between Skyrim era and the current era in terms of graphic complexity. So we obviously know the higher demands for VR require the graphics to be scaled down a little bit, but there's certain things that just aren't that noticeable in VR that you can get away with that ultimately save you a ton of frame rate. Now, what I liked about SoulKeeper was the combat mechanics. I've talked about this at length in previous episodes. Virtual reality has the potential to revolutionize combat in an RPG game, or hell, in a fighting game even, you know, your Street Fighter type stuff. I've talked also in the past about why that is, and it boils down, for anyone who didn't hear me say it, boils down to set frames of animation. You deal with a 2D game or even a 3D game, there's generally set animation frames that a character can do, and the AI is programmed to counter, accommodate, react to, etc. With virtual reality, you could have a human character swing that sword or point that wand in ways that would be very difficult to predict. But in terms of combat, could make combat as sophisticated basically as you want to make it. As lifelike is another way to say that, which is awesome. Take a look in this game, the link in the description below. For example, the character is using a scepter-like weapon, inserting into kind of a facet just on the bottom 1/3 of the scepter, put a runestone in. And I'm guessing that the runestones are different types of magic. So it might be fire-based, ice-based, etc. Then a series of buttons are tweaked, which may be things like radius, right? The area of effect, strength, just all kinds of cool potential to interact with a weapon like that, which you could do in other games, but the immersion aspect in VR just takes that to the next level. So again, that's RPG SoulKeeper. No firm date yet. I'm just hoping it's by the holiday season this year. That would be cool. Next up, HTC selling out the initial batch of Vive trackers. Hard to predict how many trackers were purchased and what that means. They're not disclosing that, HTC. But, you know, you could speculate, and my speculation would be in the tens of thousands. I don't think it would be in the hundreds of thousands. So I'm thinking between 10 and 50,000 units are what they had for the initial run. But you know what? It could be much lower. It could be the low thousands for all I know. That's just a guess. And probably closer to the 10, 20 mark than 50,000 would be my best guess. Hopefully at some point that is disclosed. But it's good news in the sense that developers are interested in using these trackers in whatever projects they're working on. So very cool. Next story, eye tracking glasses which give a glimpse into professional pianist perception. Company called Function has teamed up with eye tracking specialist Tobii, that's T-O-B-I-I, to equip a professional pianist with eye tracking glasses to see what happens. Now, they're working with pianist Daniel Beliavsky, and he's playing some complex arrangements. And you can see where his eye is focusing based on a little yellow dot. There's also a student pianist doing the same thing, and the difference between the two is revealing. As expected, the more experienced instructor, more accomplished pianist is not darting the eyes around as much. But that doesn't necessarily tell the whole story. Somebody who's really into the music, you know, I've seen Violinists, for example, do this a lot, where they get so into the music, they're contorting their head and facial expressions in all kinds of different ways. So it's an interesting area, but a very complex area. But the potential, and we'll get into that here. For example, using the input from the pianist's eyes alone, the company says, it may be possible to predict the next likely moves. But because of the complexity of how the brain, hands, and eyes interact in this case, doing so may come with extreme difficulty, like I pointed out. The more we learn about human perception, the deeper our virtual worlds will be able to immerse us. One day it's feasible, we might be able to fully emulate input and output of human perception, but today we're just at the beginning of that journey. They then talk about while we can use eye tracking input for passive things like foveated rendering, using it for interaction is a much more complex problem. But oh, how rewarding that would be. Just imagine, guys, we just talked about an RPG. Imagine, and most RPGs have this, where you make a bluff roll or, you know, some type of interaction with an NPC, a non-player character, a computer-controlled character, and you're trying to bluff. Imagine using eye tracking. Maybe the guard is questioning you on an object in the room. Well, if you're staring at that object or even look at it for a split second, the AI of the game, the routine, could capture that and construe that as, you know what, you do know about this object, even though you said you don't, and essentially call your bluff. Just all kinds of potential, but agreed, it is extremely complex to do so. But good time to start now, and hopefully 5 to 10 years from now, we just see an absolute revolution in artificial intelligence for our virtual reality games or experiences. Next story. I thought this one was neat. Again, kind of on the medical side of things. VRPHysio, enabling patients to do physical therapy in VR. The story behind this is pretty interesting, almost as interesting as the technology itself. The founder of the company, his name is Eran Or. It's E-R-A-N Or. He founded the company in Tel Aviv, so it's an Israeli-based company, and it enables patients to do their physical therapy in virtual reality. His company is one of about 90 in Israel working in different industries. And because of the accuracy of most of the modern HMDs, and you know whether they have positional tracking or not, they all have really good head tracking. So the example they use is dealing with whiplash patients. They're able to gather complex data like the limits of a specific whiplash patient, for example, how far they can move their neck. That's all data that would be a lot harder and more time consuming to gather than through the HMD. Now, not saying for a second a human touch isn't needed or required. Absolutely it is. This is just a portion that could be streamlined by using VR. And streamlining in the medical system is never a bad thing because it can get that queue moving, and a lot of times time is important. It's a critical variable in the health industry. So very cool. Wish him luck with that. Currently they are charging $300 for the product, and their goal obviously is to sell the units to PTs, physical therapists around the world. Next then, last story. This is a company called Boiler Room. They've teamed up with Google to create and attempt to replicate in 360 degree the Berlin Rave scene. So apparently about 150 different club locations are part of this. You put the HMD on and you are basically at a rave. It's called VR Dance Floors. There's a 15-minute VR experience currently designed for Pixel, so the first Google phone. A free download via Daydream VR. So currently limited to just that platform. Would be nice to see this on Gear VR, hopefully someday. With it, viewers can create what they're calling a choose your own adventure. So you can experience and interact with the different areas in the order that you want. So maybe you want to go to a club, well, a specific club that is, or a series of clubs, and then you can experience those clubs in predetermined ways as well. Maybe you're on the dance floor, maybe you're by the DJ's booth, etc. Now, obviously not something for me, but you know what? For people who are into that, I like a lot of the music, just the scene itself isn't for me anymore. But for those that do, very freaking cool. And yet, as always, another idea that VR can be thrown at. All right, guys, that is it for the news on this Sunday. Hopefully you guys had a decent weekend. The work week starts, but that's okay, guys, for Gaming Friday always looms nearby. Cheers.